Something I don't think is being discussed enough is that Georgia's offense is going to have a lot of new pieces for Carson Beck, for Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo, to figure out how this is going to mesh together. And when you lose a Brock Bowers, you lose a Lab McConkey, lose Kendall Milton and Dejan Edwards, serious staples of even Marcus Jackson. You're losing a lot of staples of your offense and guys that have been around for 3+ years and contributors for 3+ years, in some cases superstars for 3+ years. You have to figure out how you're going to move on and replace that. That's one of the challenges of college football and managing a program in general, something that Kirby and the staff has done a pretty good job of in terms of replacing talent. But who's going to be the breakout star? There's all sorts of new faces. There's Trevor Etienne, who's right. Obviously, he's an answer, and I just because I think he's going to be the starting running back, and because he's already an established name in the SEC, I don't think Trevor Etienne can be my answer. My answer has been Dylan Bell. And I think it's been a lot of people's answers. Who's going to be Georgia's breakout star? There's a lot of receptions and receiving yards to be made up for, and Dylan Bell kind of showed that he was Georgia's most dynamic weapon outside of Brock Bowers, where they could just put him anywhere and he could succeed anywhere. I think that Dylan Bell obviously showed some big playability as well. I'm going to go a little bit more off the beaten path and talk about someone else who I think really could break out for Georgia this year and be a heavy contributor in a way that they weren't last year. Roderick Robinson, running back. This will be year 2 for Roderick Robinson. Big guy, over 6 feet, 240. He just talked about it a little bit with Aaron Murray about playing at that weight, the advantages and the disadvantages that come with that. And this is a bruiser at running back that we got to see. He ended up being Georgia's 3rd leading rusher last year. Right? It doesn't say a lot when you've got a tandem in Kendall Milton and Dejan Edwards that amasses 1,600 yards and 27 touchdowns combined. And so there was kind of a committee behind those two guys. Well, Roderick Robinson ends up getting the 3rd most yards. He totals 24 carries, right, for 196 yards and 2 touchdowns. But what was he the best at, actually? He had the most yards per carry. He ended up with 8.2 yards per carry. That's a pretty good deal. Obviously, it only comes on 24 carries, so it's not a big volume stat. But in his limited carries, and obviously all in garbage time for the most part, he showed that he could be a contributor to this Georgia offense. And I think he could be a different type of contributor. It's easy to point towards Dylan Bell or Dominic Lovett, who's going to be the big-time breakout for Georgia's offense. I think that there's a lot more. There's a lack of clarity in the running back room. I think the only thing that seems clear at the moment is that Trevor Etienne was brought in not only for depth, but probably to be the RB1 for Georgia. 2 years of 700-plus rushing yards. He's got over 10 rushing touchdowns in his career at Florida. Now he's going to run behind one of the best offensive lines in college football. If not the best, it's at least the deepest. And so I think that that's an easy answer, right? He's going to be the guy. But behind him, Branson Robinson. He has been the answer for who's the other running back. And he was a guy who I thought was going to have a pretty good year in 2023. I thought he was going to have an increase in workload. And I think that Georgia would have liked that. He ends up rupturing his patellar tendon right before the 2023 season, right before his true sophomore season. And all of a sudden, now Branson Robinson's health is in question. And so I think that opens the door for Roderick Robinson to possibly be the RB2 and a big-time contributor for the Georgia Bulldogs offense in 2024. I'll get right into that real quick. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post here. Almost messed up my name. Ryan Curley. Link is down below for the newsletter. I already wrote a little bit about this on the website, doing position previews as the spring goes on. Make sure you're checking out the newsletter. All you got to do is give us your email address in the description down below, and you get all the stories pushed out to your inbox every single day. It's one of the best ways to stay up to date on college football and the Georgia Bulldogs. You want to be a smarter Georgia fan, you want to be a 5-star Georgia fan, well, those guys are signed up for the newsletter, and I appreciate you if you already have done that. Roderick Robinson, I was looking at some of his high school tape and some of his high school numbers, just kind of for fun. And Matt DeBerry, our recruiting expert, has been telling me that he was a legend out in San Diego, right? He was a Southern Cal guy, even further Southern than what you think of when you think of Southern Cal. 217 carries his senior year for 2,300 yards and 37 touchdowns. So he's one of those guys that had freakish stats and freakish numbers out there in high school. I saw that against Mater Dei, one of the best high school football programs out there. He had over 400 yards and 8 touchdowns on the ground. That's just absolutely ridiculous. So we know that this is a guy that can elevate above his competition, right, on the high school level. Well, things reset in college. And what did he actually accomplish for Georgia in his freshman year? He was a reserve running back. Now, Dylan Bell was someone that they added in, right? At the beginning of the year, Kendall Milton's health was in question, and so was Dejan Edwards. And Branson Robinson was out for the season. So Georgia found itself in a pickle offensively in that running back room. Then they start putting Dylan Bell back there, which is part of the reason why I think he's going to be Georgia's breakout offensive player, right? Because his production has been big, and I think he could have a big production year. Now, maybe there's too many mouths to feed, not enough to go around in terms of Georgia's offense. And I think that, is that a problem? It's a problem for individual player statistics. But other than that, it's not a problem. It's just the way things are for Georgia. There aren't a lot of superstar players in terms of their production. I think there's plenty of star talent. But Roderick Robinson, if Branson in his freshman year, he was the third back behind Kendall Milton. And, well, he was really the fourth back behind Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton and Dejan Edwards. Right? So Branson really was the RB4. Different offense back then. He ends up with 68 carries for 330 yards and 3 touchdowns. I'm making sure I had those numbers right. He had a big game against Auburn. The thing about Branson Robinson is we just don't know where his health's at. And he told me at the Orange Bowl that his progress was good and everything. I'm operating under the assumption that he's not going to be a big part or a part of the spring at all with the injury that he's got. It's different for every player. That's a big-time injury. It could take a year to get right, and if that's the case, taking a year to get right is during fall camp. So I don't think that we should assume Branson Robinson is necessarily going to be ready even for week 1. I think that it's not fair to assume that. Georgia does a good job with their staff. We know that they get players back fast. We saw it back with Brock Bowers. Roderick Robinson is actually a guy that suffered an injury himself, and that's part of why he doesn't have the production that you would think that he may have had as kind of Georgia's RB3 last season. And I'll talk about that in a second. That's another reason why they had to go to Dylan Bell. And Cash Jones got some time, and Andrew Paul got some time, another guy that people are excited about. I think that eye test-wise, out of those 3, they were the reserve running backs. Obviously, Dylan Bell is more of a hybrid situation that was temporary. Out of those reserve running backs, Roderick Robinson was the most impressive to me. And if Branson isn't able to go, I think that Roderick is your most likely RB2. Now, that's also under the assumption that the freshmen that come in are not going to be big contributors immediately, although I really like Nate Frazier as a prospect. I think he's someone that could be a really good running back for the Georgia Bulldogs, maybe a star running back. I think he's got that type of potential. But Roderick, I think he has some big play potential too. I mean, he had multiple carries of 20-plus yards. He had a carry of 30-plus yards. This is a guy who was their goal line back? Well, it kind of was Dejan Edwards. Well, now it could be Roderick Robinson, a 240-pound guy that's huge. Dejan Edwards was tiny compared to other running backs. Roderick Robinson's huge compared to other running backs. Obviously, they lose out on a Kendall Milton, who I think is an NFL back, a guy that could probably start on an NFL team if he's healthy and starts to develop. But with Roderick, he'll bring something that Trevor Etienne doesn't, and that anybody else in the running back room doesn't, and it's that size and strength and brutality that he can run with. So I do think there's an ability, like let's say Branson just can't go, and they're trying to figure out a 1-2 punch. It could end up being Trevor Etienne, which is he's more of a back that's predicated on his vision, his elusiveness, right? Not necessarily a burner, but can take it 80 yards if he needs to. You could have a little, thunder and lightning combo with Etienne and Roderick Robinson if they want to do that. Now, I think it'll be a little bit more of a committee-style thing. I also think, which is how loaded Georgia's wide receiver room might be with all the transfers, hey, you could throw Dylan Bell back there, here and there. You could throw another dynamic playmaker back in the backfield. I don't think Mike Bobo in the offense is going to complain about doing that. You saw them experiment with that against Tennessee, and what happens? The defense bites on a pitch to Dylan Bell. They think he's going to be the runner that takes it, and it turns into a trick play, and Marcus Jackson's wide open in the end zone. So there's ability there with Dylan Bell. But I think if there's going to be a 1-2 punch, it totally could be Roderick Robinson. Again, this is working under a couple of assumptions. The possibility that Branson Robinson might just not be ready at the beginning of the season. Now, I do think that Branson has some serious talent. I do think he might be their most talented running back. to be honest with you, I think Branson has some serious potential and could be a 1,000-yard back in this league. Georgia's not going to have multiple 1,000-yard backs, right? Dejan Edwards and Kendall Milton, not hurt, got kind of close. I don't know if they have a duo like that yet, and those guys were older and got better as time went on. But don't sleep on Roderick Robinson as a guy that could have a little bit of a breakout season as a contributor, even if it's not in a big way, even if he rushes for 500 yards. Right, that'd be a big contribution to this offense. I think it's totally possible. I think you could see him with 10-plus touchdowns just because of the goal line touches. Totally possible. What do you think about Roderick Robinson? Links are down below.